It's 1983. A 29-year-old James Cameron is rewriting the Terminator every night and prepping the film during the day. He's broke. He still hasn't made it. That'll happen once he finally releases the Terminator the following year. But suddenly, two lucrative and high-profile job offers come in at the same time. Write Aliens, a sequel to the groundbreaking Ridley Scott film Alien, one of Cameron's all-time favorite movies, and write Rambo 2. He doesn't know which one to take, and he desperately wants to make the most of these opportunities and finally make some money. So he tells the Aliens producers the situation, and they give him the very Hollywood answer: don't be stupid, take both jobs. He doesn't know how he's gonna do it, but he agrees he does both jobs. That means in a 3-month period, he has to write 3 feature scripts: Terminator rewrite, Aliens, and Rambo 2. He breaks it down mathematically. Well, each script should be 120 pages, he thinks. Total page count, 360. Then he divides the number of waking hours he'll have over the next 90 days by 360. And then he knows, okay, that's how many pages per hour I have to write. And then he just does that. Every evening he downs pot after pot of coffee, eats junk food, writes until the early hours of the morning, sleeps for a few hours, and then goes back to pre-production on the Terminator. He works like a machine, but at the end of the 90 days, he falls behind on the Aliens deadline. Luckily for us, he's human after all. But not that human. The 90 pages he finished was so good the studio did the unthinkable. They decided they would wait for him to be available to finish the script. And if his first flick, The Terminator, turned out well, they'd even let him direct it. Well, we all know how that went. But how does a man go from literally driving a truck to directing the highest grossing film of all time with Titanic in just a 20-year span? Then disappear for over a decade, do the deepest solo ocean dive of all time, and then come back to break his own box office record with some original IP he came up with in the meantime, Avatar. Well, welcome to the brain of James Cameron. After studying his life, his career, his filmmaking, here are the biggest lessons I've learned from Hollywood's most successful filmmaker. Cameron has always had a big hunger to learn. As a kid, he was a tinkerer, a sci-fi obsessed, voracious reader. But at 14, everything changed when he saw 2001: Space Odyssey. He walked out of the theater, threw up from the vertigo of the ending sequence, and knew something. He didn't just want to be a fan of movies, he wanted to make movies, especially sci-fi movies. There was one problem though. He wasn't going to film school. So while working blue-collar jobs, driving trucks, pumping gas in the desert, working in a machine shop, he built his own film education. On breaks, he would go to the USC Film Library, find 300-page dissertations on visual effects and cinematography practices, pull out the staples, and photocopy the entire thing. He gave himself a college education in visual effects while driving a truck, all for about $200 in photocopying. So the first key to James Cameron is this: he doesn't wait to learn or let excuses get in the way. He takes his curiosity into his own hands and searches for the answers himself. And that DIY attitude towards education is one of the most valuable skills you can have as a filmmaker. And that's exactly why I use Skillshare, today's sponsor. Skillshare lets me level up creatively by learning directly from world-class creatives and professionals from so many different practices. Lately, I've been diving into this amazing class on Unreal Engine 5 for beginners, and this teacher breaks everything down in a way that actually clicked for me, and within a couple of lessons, I was already experimenting with lighting and environment tools. Skillshare is all about that hands-on, learn-by-doing approach, and it makes it really easy to stay curious and keep adding new skills, just like Cameron did. So if you want to start learning Unreal Engine, or editing, or directing, or design, or writing, whatever your next step is, the first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code here will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so get started today. Back to James Cameron. James Cameron thinks like an explorer, not a director. Cameron was shaped by Jacques Cousteau documentaries when he was a teenager. He saw the deep ocean as outer space on Earth, an alien world we could actually reach. At 16, he wrote a short story that eventually became The Abyss, and decades later he decided to film it for real. But when the world's biggest underwater set didn't exist, he simply found an abandoned nuclear power plant in South Carolina and turned it into a 7.5 million gallon underwater stage, kicking off a massive civil engineering project. Cameron doesn't just film environments, he will invent them, or invent the ways to film them. He helped design underwater camera vehicles, he earned patents, he perfected gear specifically to get the shots he imagined for The Abyss. During Avatar, he was simultaneously designing a one-man submersible to dive the Mariana Trench. Camera he helped design eventually went up to Mars on the rover. Cameron said it best, "I'm an explorer at heart, a filmmaker by trade." And at the end of the day, his movies are kind of the funding model for his curiosity more than anything else. And I think that's why they feel like expeditions. The Abyss, Titanic, Avatar, they're journeys into worlds no one else has seen. And because he insists on taking audiences somewhere truly new, his films aren't just hits, they're not just big blockbusters. They become global events and experiences that people can't stop telling their friends about, aka box office gold, baby. Cameron's early jobs to pay the bills show up everywhere in his work. Oil rig workers in the Abyss, the Marines and aliens. These characters feel real because Cameron lived among people like this. He was one of them. In the Terminator, Sarah Connor starts as a waitress at a diner. James Cameron's girlfriend at the time was a Bob's Big Boy Burger waitress. And even when the scale of his stories is enormous, which it usually is, he never loses the emotional core, the simple humanity between the relationships of the characters, their quirks, their individuality, and things that we really relate to. And something we forget about with his films is because he's using cutting-edge tools like motion capture, virtual cameras, CGI, the emotional spine gets built long before anything technical. So he's shooting a scene one time trying to get the perfect take. He doesn't care anything about coverage or the sunset or extras missing their marks. He just has to focus on a dialogue scene between two characters, and then later, maybe a year later, he'll actually figure out the coverage, the reverses, the close-ups, the wide shots, the sun going over a waterfall. All of that can come later. In the moment, he's really only focused on the humanity and the emotional core of the scene. That's his approach to Avatar anyways, with the performance capture techniques, but I think the same prioritization went into his earlier films like The Abyss and Terminator. Typically, FX heavy films do not have good storytelling, characters, emotional stakes, but Cameron separates himself from the pack by doing that. I mean, his films really work. They have characters you remember, that you quote lines from for years to come. That's what makes them stand out.
I'll be back.
By the way, fun fact about this line, Arnold did not like it as written. He really wanted to say, "I will be back." He thought it sounded more robotic. James Cameron's response, "I don't tell you how to act, don't tell me how to write. Say the line." Safe to say it worked out. James Cameron is known for being a very intense guy, and his intensity begins with his own work ethic. From day one, he loved being in the trenches. His first real industry job was at Roger Corman's low-budget movie factory, where he started as a model builder. But very quickly, a few weeks later, he was promoted to the art director of the whole film that he was working on. He quickly realized he could do the jobs above him and was not shy about saying so. He had this kind of innate confidence that preceded his actual accomplishments as a filmmaker, which I'm very jealous of. One day, he cornered Roger Corman and pitched himself to be the second unit director who would shoot inserts at night. And Corman just said, "Great. Start tomorrow. Round up a few guys to help you."
And the second unit basically became this steamroller that wound up shooting about a third of the picture.
And this is something he's known for. You'll always see Cameron holding the camera. He'll be jumping into the edit himself. He'll be helping mix sound. Almost every aspect and technical job of making a film, he knows how to do very well. Except acting, I guess. When he knows how he wants something done, he prefers to just jump in and do it and show how he wants it done. And I would imagine there's a lot of micromanagement going on. But I know during The Abyss, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, the lead actress, stormed off yelling, "We are not animals," after some grueling retakes of this resuscitation scene that was really intense. On Aliens, the British crew that he was working with resented this young North American director who's like 30 with impossibly high standards, who's just killing himself to make a movie. And they're taking tea breaks every 5 minutes. He was having nonstop fights and issues with this crew and felt like they were working against him. And this is the quote, I had to pull this up, that he said to them on the last day of shooting. "This has been a long and difficult shoot, but the one thing that kept me going through it all was the certain knowledge that one day I would drive out the gate of Pinewood Studios and never come back, and you sorry bastards would still be here." And by the way, this is just one of the top 10 incredible quotes that I found from James Cameron. He's a fun guy. But the lesson here is he expects everything from his team because he gives everything himself. During The Abyss, after shoot days, he would often have to decompress underwater because this would be like a really deep tank. He'd be at the bottom filming sometimes for the whole day. Then he had to decompress like 10 feet underwater for 1 to 2 hours. and not wanting to waste time, he installed a monitor outside a window in the tank so that he could watch dailies while hanging 10 feet below the surface in his scuba gear. And then he'd even flip himself upside down when his neck got tired from the weird angle. So crew members would be leaving the set after some 16-hour day and see their director under the water, inverted like a bat, reviewing footage and taking calls from studio execs through his scuba gear headset. If you're witnessing that level of commitment from the leader of the set, you're probably going to end up raising your own standards too. But again, it's not easy working on those sets, and I think the only people that enjoy working on those sets are people like Cameron, who are very ambitious and a little crazy. Now, over time, he's acknowledged his intensity and that he could be an asshole on set. He says that he softened after Titanic, and when he started doing his deep sea expeditions, he began seeing the little teams that he worked with more as small families rather than soldiers out there to achieve a mission, which is a relief for me to learn because I've always believed you don't have to be an asshole to make an incredible movie. So the fact that he had that come to Jesus moment and still made some incredibly successful films is nice to hear. The last key to James Cameron's success is simple, but it explains everything. He is attracted to hard things. In his words, I like difficult. I'm attracted by difficult. Difficult is a magnet for me. The really talented filmmakers don't want to do the difficult stuff, and that gives me a tactical edge to show people something they've never seen before. Cameron realized early he didn't need to be the most gifted filmmaker alive. He just had to go where gifted people wouldn't, and that's how he could separate himself. Anyone can shoot a movie on dry land, but how many directors will build an 8 million gallon water tank inside a nuclear power plant to make their film the way they want to do it? Anyone can imagine a liquid metal villain, although I don't think I could. How many will invent the tools to make it happen and push a whole line of technology, CGI, far enough to bring it to life? Anyone can picture an alien rainforest. How many will spend 15 years developing new cameras, rigs, 3D shooting, performance capture pipelines, all this just to make it feel real? By the way, Cameron co-founded a company called Digital Domain, which was one of the VFX companies that was at the forefront of pushing CGI technology along. For Cameron, hard isn't a warning sign, it's a compass. Impossible is an opportunity. Everything difficult about bringing a story to life becomes a moat that separates him from the competition. And almost every leap forward in his career came from chasing a problem no one else wanted. The Abyss, you have underwater photography, which is grueling and frustrating and kind of dangerous. CG water creatures that no studio believed was even achievable. Terminator 2, again, you have that groundbreaking CGI and action scenes and set pieces that were just incredible and huge. Titanic, well, we all know what the ending's gonna be, and it was mocked as this guaranteed flop until it became the biggest film of all time. And Avatar, another original IP piece, a huge world that required an entirely new filmmaking pipeline and ecosystem. This mindset, though, is why Cameron plays the long game. But he holds on to these ideas for decades until the technology finally catches up. And if the technology's not catching up fast enough, then he helps push it along. He'll help reinvent the medium to fit the idea instead of shrinking the idea to fit the medium. And frankly, he hasn't had that many failures, but when he does have one, he definitely learns from it. Look, The Abyss is an excellent film. It's so intense, but this was his only feature not to make a killing at the box office. It basically broke even. Now, besides the marketing behind it, Cameron acknowledged that he stumbled a bit with the ending.
I think the film's really good for the first 2 hours. I think the last 10 minutes or so is really embarrassing.
He vowed never to let the emotional climax arrive too early in the film and let the air out too soon, which he says happened in The Abyss. And this is a lesson that he kept in mind while writing the devastating final act of Titanic, which had an ending that was so tragic and beautiful that it kept teenage girls coming back to the theater every week for months to watch that thing. But from all the interviews and reading I've done on Cameron, it really seems like these difficult challenges are where he feels most alive. He loves chasing those difficult problems and trying to solve them. And the movie is almost a backdrop for him satiating that urge and exploring those ideas and themes and topics and technical workflows. And that's why he isn't just another guy who makes expensive movies. James Cameron is the truck driver who built his own film school in a binder. He's the explorer who used movies to fund dives to the bottom of the ocean. He's the director literally fighting for air underwater to get the shot. And he's the futurist who waits decades until the tools exist to bring his visions to life, emotionally, technically, and if they don't, he'll create the technology to bring them to life. So what's the takeaway here? Well, most indie filmmakers aren't about to make a $200 million movie and build submarines in our garages in our spare time, but we can still borrow from his mindset. We can teach ourselves aggressively. We can cultivate an intense curiosity about the world. We can prioritize the grounding details in humanity and even the most fantastical worlds we create. And we can always look at the hard problems as the greatest opportunities to break through. That's all I got for you. If you want to learn more about James Cameron, he is such a fascinating guy and filmmaker. Check out the book The Futurist by Rebecca Keegan. That's where I got most of this information from, as well as watching tons of interviews, rewatching his old movies. Had a great time doing a deep dive, so to speak, on James Cameron. And I wanted to get this video out before the third Avatar movie comes out. I'm not the biggest Avatar fan in the world, but I will say I saw both movies in the theater and I was absolutely swept away both times. I can't really like quote any lines from Avatar like I can for literally all of James Cameron's other movies, so I kind of hope that he gets off the Avatar train like most of us do and does some more original stuff. But I gotta say, I'm gonna go see the third one and I'm sure I'll be swept away once again. It's a great movie theater experience, and with Netflix now buying Warner Brothers, I'm worried that we might not get too many more great movie theater experiences in the future. So go to your local cinemas, folks, and don't use your phones while you're there. All right, that's the end of my rant. Bye.